The SAT reading often leaves many students feeling frustrated and confused on a lot of question types. They struggle to find the evidence, and probably the most common complaint of many students is they feel like there could be more than one correct answer. So we're going to go through 3 simple tips which are going to help you avoid one of the most commonly missed type of questions, help you find your evidence far faster, and help you know what to look out for when you're stuck between multiple answer choices. So if you've taken a SAT or a PSAT or taken one or two of them, you probably started to notice this trend where almost every single passage, the first question or the first 2 questions are about the passage as a whole. They're about what was the idea, the purpose, the central theme, the structure. And what many students do is they just go ahead and answer the question at this point. At this point, you've basically fallen for a trap the SAT has set you. As we work back through all the other questions, we're going to have to go back and reread significant parts of the passage, and our overall understanding of the passage as a whole, what the main idea is, what the central purpose is going to drastically improve. So tip number 1 is always save those big, broad passage questions for last. They're going to be far easier for you to answer them, and you're going to also avoid what is called recency bias, where we put more importance into what we just read. Oftentimes, your wrong answer choices for these are something that is just talked about in the last third of the passage, and because we remember that detail so well, we want to pick it out. Tip number 2 is what we call the bracketing question tip, and this actually kind of adds on to a really basic principle which can make your life way easier on the SAT as well. The questions run in very chronological order for the most part on the SAT. This often means some of your first 3 questions are going to appear at the front of the passage. The exception to this is those questions we just talked about that ask about the whole passage at all. Your last 3 questions are generally going to be speaking in that last third of the passage, but anytime you see a question which is smushed between 2 lined questions, and this could even occur if we had multiple questions between these, there is a really good probability that we know our evidence for question 26 is going to run between 20 and 42. So this makes finding our correct evidence way, way easier, because rather than just looking back through the whole passage, we now have a very specific area we can look. And here we see, according to the passage, researchers have identified which mechanism is potentially responsible for the initial attraction between the microscope tip and the salt. Well, what I can see here is it is right here in this line. It is so close to this latter one, but it's saying it's due to the van der Waals, and just by using that tip, it makes my life so much easier for finding the evidence and working through the passage faster. Our third tip is boring is better, but we more specifically can state that as every word in your answer choice must be provable for it to be right. So this means as answer choices get more and more specific, it's more and more difficult for those to be correct given the passage. Everything on the SAT has to be provable based off something you read in the passage. So as your answer choices get more and more specific, it means you're going to need to see those really specific details for them to be true. That's why oftentimes boring is better. But we're going to look through a kind of classic example of this from earlier on that SAT test 8. The narrator indicates that he pays Samperi blank. So we're really just going to kind of focus on this block of text, but we're going to need a little context over here as well. The bookseller would let me sit on a chair in a corner and read any book I liked to my heart's content. He hardly ever allowed me to pay for the books he placed in my hands, but when he wasn't looking, I'd leave the coins I'd managed to collect on the counter before I left. It was only small change. If I'd had to buy a book with that pittance, I would probably have only been able to afford only a booklet of cigarette papers. So a few things here. Number 1, the bookseller is not allowing him to pay generally, so he doesn't expect him to pay for the books. B is wrong because he's not paying nothing. He's sometimes leaving some coins. And now C is wrong here because this is our context down here we need. My father was not a miser, and despite the hardships we suffered, whenever he could, he gave me a few coins so that I could buy some treats like the other children. And now up here it's saying he thought he was spending them on that, but secretly he's using them to buy a book. So we know he's not making money from selling sweets. That's why that's wrong. But D is our correct answer here, and it's completely provable because he's paying a small pittance for the books, not their full value. But the really important thing here is anytime you start feeling stuck between 2 answer choices, look for that single word, or sometimes it might be 1 or 2 words, that is enough that you look back in the passage and you say, you know what, I can't prove that given some lines from the passage. That allows you to eliminate those answer choices and really starts to improve your SAT reading score.